thanks for coming on to Beyond. Really glad to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
And for the audience benefit, I'd like to give a little preamble on Richard and his background. So we're joined today by Richard Sudek, Executive Director of UCI Beall Applied Innovation. As an entrepreneur at a young age, Richard's childhood business efforts were nonstop. From the classic lemonade stand to washing guest cars at neighborhood parties, Richard knew his passion was to build and grow businesses. Richard founded his first company, get this, with $250, Natick, a data networking design implementation firm, serving clients like Microsoft, Boeing, Arco, and Universal Studios. At the age of 41, after considering offers from a dozen corporations, Sudek sold the business to SAIC, a multi-billion-dollar international firm. Pretty impressive, Richard, to say the least. I know when you're starting a business, whether the goal is to sell it or not, the idea that you can create that kind of value and then bring it to some exit is no easy task for sure.
Thank you. Yes, plenty of entrepreneurs much more successful than me, but was fortunate to be able to exit.
So Richard, if you could take the audience back to where it all started for me. You're on this incredible journey right now with innovation, and you started your company, you founded it, you sold it, and then you went into this really deep dive in education. But if you could take the audience back to when you're maybe in your late teens, early 20s, as to how you got your start.
So as you sort of alluded to, from a young age, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I was the kid with lemonade stands and all the different types of things like that. So it was really working towards what kind of startup would I do? And back when I went to college, entrepreneurship was not nearly as prevalent as it is today at universities. You know, there's all kind of entrepreneur centers typically, and there's entrepreneur classes or entrepreneur minors or majors, etc. And so for me, this was really inherent in something that I wanted to do from a very young age. And so I was really searching for what to do. And I had a computer science background, and I was working in the computer business. And back when there were mini computers called DEC computers.
Sure.
And so when I was doing that kind of work, I figured out a way to do something in that particular arena.
Okay, interesting. So as you went through your process, and I believe you founded your company, and then you really went, you had your computer science degree early on from UCI. Where did the idea for Natick come from?
So back in the 80s, mini computers were very popular, like networks are now. And there was a need for equipment. When you'd order a mini computer back in the 80s, it would take 6 to 12 months or more to get. So there was an opportunity for used DEC equipment. And so we got involved with reselling DEC equipment, selling some new DEC equipment, and doing some consulting around DEC mini computers. But quite frankly, within a few years, we saw that the PC networking was going to really be the future. So we quickly transitioned after a few years into what was called back then Novell networking, which was the more popular, sort of initial more popular way to network PCs. And really displaced mini computers back at that time.
Well, it's a big undertaking because that paradigm shift from going from a mini mainframe to a small PC. I remember I was with Edwards Life Sciences early on when I was sort of in between college, and I remember they were going through those changes in their networking and how they were structuring the computer part of the organization. So that wasn't without its challenges. So as you looked at Natick and you started Natick, was it hard to sell it? Was it a timing thing? I mean, what led you to that point where you said at 41, the time is right now to sell the company?
Well, it was really a combination of things. One is, I started it with $250, and so I bootstrapped it up. I'd never taken a business class, never taken an entrepreneurship class, so I really had to learn everything the hard way. And so after 17 years of doing that, and there were certainly cash flow times or cash flow problems over time, I'd been doing it for a while. And when I looked at the sort of the landscape of competition, there was probably 10,000 what back then were called Novell and Microsoft partners across the country. And so there was a roll-up starting to happen where larger companies were buying up regional players to consolidate those. And it looked to me that it was going to be hard as a small independent company to really compete with these larger corporations that were doing the roll-ups. So at the time, there were a number of companies trying this roll-up strategy. And so we were approached by a number of them. And looking at that, I just decided that, this might be a good time to exit. And I was very fortunate. It was really more luck, but I exited in 99. And, 2000, 2001, the bubble burst, and the whole IT area took quite a big dip. And so it was a good time to get out, because all the roll-ups sort of froze because a lot of the capital dried up to do the roll-ups. So we were really very fortunate to get out at the time that we did.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was with the startup medical device company, 97, a company called Cardiothoracic Systems. In that era, there was a lot of money in the markets, and that eventually sold for about 320 million. Then fast forward about 2001, 2002, boy, were those lean times in the markets, going out to try to raise money, given the bursts on the tech bubble. That kind of affected the medical device bubble as well. So I can relate to that. And timing in startups, for sure, it's all about timing, right? You could be the most brilliant, masterful statistician or strategy guy, and the reality is it comes down to timing and some luck. Does the strategic you're looking at, does that fill the white space, or does that fill some of the gray space of their strategy? And so again, here's the luck, right?
Yeah. And if you work really hard, you tend to get luckier. But yeah, there's plenty of luck involved.
That's for sure. So as I read your background, I was really impressed from Natick. You really powered through a number of degrees from the prestigious Claremont School of Business, from a master's degree in organizational behavioral studies to an executive MBA to a PhD in management. Having successfully run a company you founded, what was the motivation to go back to school versus start another company?
So at that point, I really wanted to retool, right? I had running a small business, had never taken a business class, thought it'd be interesting to go back and get an executive MBA. In addition, my personal mission shifted after I sold my company. I was on the board of Big Brothers Big Sisters, the local Orange County chapter, and doing some nonprofit work, but really thought that I wanted to shift to give back to entrepreneurs. And so I went back to get an executive MBA, and I'm somewhat of a continuous learner, and just found that so interesting. I got the second master's and then got the PhD, because during that process, I realized, one, that I could retool and maybe be more helpful to entrepreneurs and startups by getting some of that knowledge. But also, as I went through that, I realized that teaching entrepreneurs might be very rewarding. And so working with student entrepreneurs was something that I sought to do after the PhD. In the university environment, you can teach with a master's, but if you get a PhD, you usually have a few more options to teach.
Sure.
And so the PhD was really twofold. One was to be able to teach, and two, I started a research track on how angel investors make decisions. And so I actually used Tech Coast Angels as sort of the laboratory for that. I tracked over 500 companies, I videotaped screenings, and I was able to look at data on how to predict how angels look at investments and deals. And most of the research at that point was retro. In other words, they'd look back and they'd ask an investor, in your last 10 deals, how did you make the investment? So it was retrospective. And we know that from cognitive psychology that retrospective research is faulty. In other words, you don't quite remember the details as well when you look over the last 6 months or say 2 years. So we actually put instruments in the screening process to collect data during the actual screening, and had investors fill out during the screening process and right after the screening. So based on personality, cognitive style, regulatory focus, experience, expertise, et cetera, we could predict how an investor would rate a deal based on their background. Which is not too surprising. So from social psychology, we know that there's a lot going on based on how faulty our perceptions are and how our past experiences really inform and impact how we look at things. And it's no different in the investment world. I was really interested to understand that investment process, because when I built Natick, I bootstrapped it. I didn't go out and get angel money, et cetera. So this was all a new area for me. So it was a bit of a lengthy answer. Before the PhD, I would have been able to answer that more concisely. Going through the process, more words. But I got fascinated with that whole area. But teaching was really one of the main goals.
It's fascinating you say that, because there's the sort of spectrum of trying to raise money as a small young entrepreneur, and the idea that more and more schools are providing classes and structure around entrepreneurship. I remember going to University of Utah a couple of years ago, And I graduated from there, and I went back and I was stunned at this facility they had specifically for startups, because there's a lot, just like UCI, there's a lot of ideas coming out of these universities. And the question is, how do you harness the ideas, certainly to the benefit of the university? But here was interesting for Utah. Anybody coming up with an idea, they wouldn't lay claim to. It wasn't theirs. What they were trying to do is teach these young students how to think like an entrepreneur and understand the steps of starting your company, running it, raising money. But what you said was really interesting for an investor standpoint, institutional investors or larger VC firms. It's interesting to have they taken any of this data to heart, because that would probably inform which deals they would invest in or not invest in. Is this something that you could leverage for VCs and angel groups?
Well, some of it you can leverage. The problem with research and the problem with research related to early stage investing is you really need to track the companies for 10 years. So if you really want to understand how to pick successful ones, which by the way is very difficult because there's a lot of confounding factors that happen in the process. Like in other words, 9/11 happened. Well, there's a lot of startups during 9/11 that got killed and they could not have predicted it, right?
Right.
And the pandemic, there's no way a startup could have predicted that. And so, but there are things to look at to understand that. I want to caution to say that we can necessarily inform VCs. There's a lot of discussion about, is it the horse or jockey? Is it the idea or the entrepreneurial team? And my research certainly pointed towards the team being the more important factor, which many VCs would agree with that. One of the things that triggered that research was an early study back in the 90s that showed that both VCs and angels pick passion of the entrepreneur and trustworthy entrepreneur as one of the top attributes above return on investment and other things. So what triggered that interest was this idea that there's these soft factors going on. It's not return on investment, the specific numbers and the analytics, but it's those characteristics of the entrepreneur which lead you again towards the team that are important and impact or influence the investor to maybe rate a deal higher or lower because of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would tend to agree with that. And sometimes people think it's very analytical. It's black and white. It's the numbers. It's maybe the technology. It's the market size. But all that being equal, it ultimately comes down to the team, is in my experience. There's no question about that. So as I look at your career arc, you're definitely massively prepared to run UCI Beall Applied Innovation. You have a very unique background. If you can share with the audience, what is UCI Beall Applied Innovation and what is its mission?
So our mission is really to help Orange County become a globally recognized entrepreneur region. And the only reason I joined UCI, because initially I wasn't too excited because of the size. I just thought it'd be too bureaucratic. I'm a bootstrap entrepreneur. So anything over 100 people is the federal government to me. And as you might be aware, the
right.
UC system is the largest university system in the world. It's massive. I mean, UCI is 36,000 students and pretty big just by itself. And it's part of even a bigger system. But the chancellor gave me the opportunity to build something for the community. So I wasn't interested, but when he gave me that opportunity, I couldn't say no. It was an opportunity to really give back to the entrepreneurial community because the resources at UCI allowed me to build something for the community much bigger than I was building at Chapman. Chapman was a great university and I loved it. And I was doing some things there, but the resources that UCI afforded me allowed me really to build the Cove and build out a lot of programs and events and an event space that we feel is starting to impact Orange County. One of the disadvantages in Orange County is we don't have sort of a central hub, like a downtown area. We're 34 cities, we're sort of strewn across all of Orange County. And so the goal was try to create a center of gravity for entrepreneurs and investors and also the other people, around that ecosystem of entrepreneurs. And so again, this is built for the community first, and most universities build this effort inward. I'll just say that within our organization, we have the tech transfer function for the university, what's called industry-sponsored research, and entrepreneurship for the whole university, where entrepreneurship is typically in the business school, maybe engineering, or in a school. We're here to support undergrads, grads, and alums. When it comes to UCI, we're here to support UCI researchers. But again, a number of our programs, a number of our focus is on the community. So entrepreneurs and investors not related at all to UCI.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've been to UCI Beall Applied Innovation Center, And I know you also are aligned with the Cove. And so can you share a little bit more about the Cove and the impact it's making in terms of the ecosystem and trying to bring and drive, different organizations together?
Yeah, so this is a little confusing for some. What is the Cove versus Beall Applied Innovation? So the Cove is simply the building, and Beall Applied Innovation is the UCI unit that resides in the building. But the reason I did that is we originally had a very academic and formal name. We were the Institute for Innovation. And I just wanted something that was simple and could appeal maybe to the community that wasn't necessarily UCI all over it. And so the Cove was designed to be this place for the community. And the reason we picked the word Cove, there's a couple of reasons. One is Cove represents a safe harbor for ships. And so the idea is the Cove is safe harbor for entrepreneurs. And we wanted to play off the beach theme and a more informal atmosphere. So if you go to the Cove, you'll find a beach theme, you'll find surfboards, and that was twofold. One was to create an inviting, sort of casual environment. And most universities take themselves too seriously and they're a bit sterile. And so we just wanted a friendly, inviting environment, and we thought the Cove sort of connected to the community. You know, we're 10 minutes from the beach, and California is about the beach, et cetera. So that was the reason for the Cove and for the naming of Applied Innovation.
So UCI Beall Applied Innovation also has lab space for companies for early stage startups. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Or is it a specific program? How do companies get access to it? And just to sort of shed some more light on that.
So there's actually lots of ways to get access. So we had over 50,000 people through the building last year, and that was over 90% non-UCI. So all kind of pitch events and different entrepreneurial events. So one is they can go to our website, innovation.uci.edu, and sign up for our mail list to get information. But if they're an entrepreneur and they need help, really going to our SBDC is the best place to start. The SBDC has angel investors and former business people and entrepreneurs who provide free consulting to entrepreneurs to help them with their business idea and to help them find funding. They focus mostly on scalable startups. So these would be startups that would typically need angel funding and VC corresponding funding. And if you go to, again, innovation.uci.edu, there's a tab, programs, and you can simply select the SBDC and fill out a simple form, and you'll be contacted and we'll set up an appointment. So that's one way to get sort of into the Cove. We do have office space that we rent to entrepreneurs. So there is more space opening up in June, assuming we're back in the building, but we're opening up the third floor. We do have a maker space. We do have University Lab Partners, which is wet labs for the community. It's a nonprofit stood up just for the community. It's in our building. And so there's all kinds of different events and programs and workshops, what are called SBIR, STTR workshops, et cetera, for the community entrepreneurs.
That's fantastic. You know, my background, I was about 10 years in the Bay Area, and I always marveled that they had this incredible ecosystem of legal, of financial, of a lot of startup talent. You know, a lot of people there that have gone through the startup mills. And I don't think Orange County is too far from that, except it doesn't have quite the infrastructure and certainly doesn't have the investment dollars. But I've often marveled at the fact that Orange County is rife with incredible entrepreneurial talent, yet there seemed to be a lack of cohesive force to bring together the corporate community, academia, entrepreneurs, research, and connections to drive the transformational breakthroughs, which are really vital for the OC economy. So how does Beall Applied Innovation serve to integrate these communities to enhance the Orange County ecosystem?
So also in our building, we have all kinds of resources. So we have VC hours. We have VCs who have offices at the Cove, and some of these are local VCs, and some of these are out of the Bay Area. We have someone dedicated, Luis Vasquez, who manages all our VC relations, and so his job is to connect any startup in Southern California to investors, seed, angel, or VCs. We take no fees, no commission. He has over 100 VC partners. We have about 7 in the building. I mean, we're not in the building today, but that are tenants, and we have other VCs that come down and have office hours, et cetera. So really what we have there is the investment piece. We have corporations now opening up offices in the Cove who are interested in the startups The Cove Fund operates out of the Cove, which is a separate entity. But they screened over 300 deals last year, to give an example. And mostly deals from Orange County, but a reasonable amount from LA and San Diego. Again, they provide the first $500,000 into startups. And they're, again, scalable startups, but they're not mandated to invest in UCI startups. They're there for the community again. And they often fund bigger rounds, because although the fund only goes into $500,000, the way we set that up originally was all the investors can co-invest. So sometimes a deal will get $1 million or more from the Cove Fund, which was really designed to be the seed piece. What I saw when I started this about 5.5 years ago is that some of the angel groups have gone upstream. And so they want firms closer to revenue, et cetera. And so the seed investment was sort of slipping away from the angel world. So the idea was, we need to get the seed in. Now, if you're a little older and have some experience, like you have a network. But if you're 25 and you don't come from a wealthy family, you don't have a network to raise the first few $100,000.
Exactly.
And so the whole point of the seed fund was to help the early entrepreneur, the early stage, and probably younger, but obviously we have entrepreneurs of all ages come in, but the ones who don't have the entrepreneurial network. And then what we did, the way was designed, is we have a number of angels that are in that fund. So the deal automatically gets socialized up into Keiretsu and Tech Coast Angels, et cetera. And then Luis helps guide you to the angel groups and the VCs, and he'll make introductions. So we really can help you from seed up to, say, Series C. We can help you beyond Series C, but the point is, once you get to C, you're probably good and on your own. But getting to A, not too easy if it's first time, and even B. And so we tend to help mostly C to, say, Series B.
So you mentioned the Cove Fund.
Sorry.
That's great. And you mentioned the Cove Fund. And when I look at angel groups, usually you have groups of people investing money. Maybe they put together an LLC and invest as a group, and then they have the representative. And then certainly they can invest on the side. But the Cove Fund's a little different. It's actually a fund of money, and you have a board that's running it that allocates the funds, as opposed to a traditional angel group. So can you talk more about the Cove Fund? And what its real thrust is from the investment perspective?
So we're on Co-Fund 2. Fund 1 was very small. The first one's harder to raise. It was $5 million. The second one's $14 million. And Mike Benvenuti runs that fund along with 2 other partners, Paul Voice. I just blanked on Howard Merowitz is the other fund manager. Sorry. And so the way that's designed is the investors in the fund come to the screenings, and the investors help do due diligence. So it's almost a hybrid. It's similar to an angel group in that there are individual investors in, but the managers sort of manage it, run it, help manage the due diligence process, and then they finally vote on it. But they vote on it with a committee of people who put money in the fund. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. It's similar to a VC fund in that it's a fund that writes one check. It's not an angel group that writes multiple checks. But there are individuals who are the investors who actually do due diligence and are involved. There's 99 investors in Fund 2, and not all of them are involved, but a lot of them are, and a lot of them come to those screenings. So it's really sort of a hybrid, and it gets people engaged. And by having those investors involved, the fund then can write co-investment, right? The investors in the fund can write co-investment checks. And that's where some deals get $1 million, $1.5 million in. And that's really, that's an angel round size, right? So there's the Cove Fund. And let me just also mention, beyond the angel groups that screen and are housed at the Cove, I also built a syndication of about 50 angel groups. And once a month, they send entrepreneurs to the Cove, and we stream it out across the country. So if you get into, like, say, Tech Coast Angels, then your deal can be syndicated into what's called ASN, Angel Syndication Network, and that gives you the gap round. So typically, Tech Coast Angels will do $500,000 to $1 million. ASN can do $1 million to $2 million, and then you'd be ready typically for Series A. Depends on the company. If you need a lot of capital, maybe you need more. But a lot of companies, the angel round's $1 million, and the gap round can be $1.5 million, sort of follow on, and then the Series A can be $5 or whatever, $3 to say $10 million or something.
Is Cove Fund 2 focused on technology, medical devices? Is there a certain thrust of the investment dollars go into a specific industry or segment?
So not industry, I'd say, but technology. So they really don't do much in medical devices, and we're actually looking at creating a seed fund like the co-fund for medical devices and medical technology. The co-fund has done some medical devices, so they're not going to do, for instance, pharma, but they will do some digital health and those types of things. But I would consider them more general tech, right? So SaaS-based companies, there are some hardware companies in there, but they're mostly just general tech, not related to a particular sector.
Right, right. So you did mention that there's, and as I looked at your website, you guys got a plethora of programs. And right now with my startup, I'm working on an SBIR grant. But I read that you have obviously programs such as Innovation Advisors, SBDC, SBIR grants, Student Funded Startup Fund. You have a number of resources for the entrepreneur. Can you just give us a high-level perspective of some of these programs that have been particularly helpful to entrepreneurs?
So I think, again, I'd start with the SBDC. That's a great place to start because that will get you plugged in. I mean, there's other ways to get plugged in, but you can get free consulting from these consultants. We have a number of workshops we put on for the community. We do SBIR workshops, for instance. We do have an SBIR consultant who can work with startups. And so there's just really a number of different programs involved. You mentioned the Innovation Advisors. They're there to help teams, et cetera. So the SBDC is probably the best way to get started, but there are different ways if you sign up to get connected. I mean, again, Luis is there as a resource for fundraising, and he'll get you connected to the co-fund or Tech Coast Angels or VCs, depending on what you need. And so for instance, if you connect it to the SBDC, they'll connect you to Luis. You can also directly connect to Luis too. But again, that's a good place to start.
You know, you somewhat answered this, but it's been one of the bugaboos for me being here in Orange County, and this relates to investment dollars. And I've talked to Bill Carpoo of Octane OC about the issues with capital in Orange County. But I read where UCI Beall Applied Innovation is working on a culture, or they're trying to cultivate an innovation district in the heart of Orange County, which I think is brilliant, producing more startups and more scale-ups and ultimately a world-class entrepreneurial ecosystem. However, there seems to be a disconnect from the infrastructure to support innovation and really the funding. I mean, I think there's a lot of ideas, a lot of brilliant people, a lot of people coming through UCI for sure. And there seems to be that disconnect in the funding to really advance the innovation. I think you guys have really stepped out at the fore here with the idea of bringing angel groups in and VCs, offices within your space. But on a larger scale, how can this funding gap be addressed? How do you take mainline VCs from the Bay Area and really have an office here in a meaningful way where they recognize Orange County as a vibrant ecosystem?
So I think some of those are being addressed. So first of all, let's talk about sort of the seed or the early stage. It was about 2 years ago, the Valley had 1.2 billion of seed funding, and Southern California had 1.1. So we're actually not too far behind on the early stage, but when we get to Series A, that's where we have this huge drop off. And so basically the VC funding. So one is attract VCs down. Two is CEO Leadership Alliance, CLA, has created a fund that's funding local VCs. And so there is more money being pumped into the local VCs. And by creating this center of gravity at the Cove, I mean, the nice thing is that we're 10 minutes from the airport. So VCs are now from out of state and from the Bay Area coming down on a more regular basis to have office hours and to integrate in the community. And before, they really had no place to go. So the Cove, it was important to have a physical place, right? Mm-hmm. For them to come. And because we have these pitch events, and because we have these workshops, there's just a lot of deal flow, a lot of entrepreneurs through the building. So, and we are creating different events that the VCs support. So right now we've gone to a virtual VC talk, or it's really an investor talk. We've had some angels and VCs that Luis runs once a week. In fact, it's today at 11. It's typically on Friday, but it moves around a little bit. So that's to connect at a virtual way. But when we're back in the building, VCs are there and available. And so we need to get the good entrepreneurs in Orange County and really Southern California in general. Some people, set up LA and San Diego as competition. I really look at them as a big advantage. In other words, looking at Southern California as an ecosystem and promoting that to the outside world is significant. We graduate 30,000 STEM students a year. We have over $8 billion research budget. And we have more PhDs than anywhere in the country in Southern California. So although I'm here to promote Orange County and help Orange County, the fact that LA and San Diego is on the edge is actually a big advantage, because I'd much rather see a startup go to San Diego or LA than the Bay Area. Because if they stay in Southern California, they'll just sort of keep rotating around, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they go to the Bay Area, then they used to be more stuck up there, but that's not the case. We now are trying to keep those companies here for Series A. And once they get Series A, our philosophy is that they're a lot less likely to move up, because they've hired enough employees, they have enough infrastructure in place. The VCs don't really want to pull them up. But when they only have seed investing and they're smaller, it's easier for them to get pulled up. So there's lots of different accelerators here in Allen Orange County. OC4 by Kerry, that's an effort that's great. So the more opportunity and activities and events and resources we have locally, we can help build better startups. And then as we get VCs to come in, even if we just have them come in a few times a month to have office hours, and they start investing here, I think that we can keep the startups here and they won't get pulled up. The other thing is that the cost of living in the Bay Area has really made it hard for the startups to go up there. And so there's a couple different things going on that I think will help keep startups here. And so look, this is a marathon. I'm not saying that we're going to fix this in a few years. We started with 1,500 square feet 5 years ago, and we have 100,000 now.
Right.
And so we made progress. We have a lot more to do, and we need everyone helping out. But the more we can get the VCs concentrated here and the funding comes here and the startups stay, it then will, we hope, snowball to have a more robust entrepreneurial ecosystem here.
Do you see other UCI systems, whether it be in LA or San Diego, having a similar ecosystem or a similar setup as you have here in Orange County, kind of like sister organizations within San Diego or LA?
So there are other organizations, but they're not UC based. The UC campuses have basically built their entrepreneurial effort internally. So that's really the difference. And we've had the UN and universities from across the world visit us. In fact, the university in the Netherlands has an office here. Canada is going to open an office here. So by building this for the community, what we're doing is we're trying to raise the whole tide. Again, I don't want to sound arrogant. We've got a lot of work to do, but someone has to be crazy enough to start this effort, and I was, to try to do something to create this center of gravity, because it wasn't going to sort of happen organically. And the nice thing is, we're not an organization that's out trying to raise money to build our organization. We're Switzerland. We're part of the university. We're nonprofit. We don't have a motive if, like a VC or another organization was trying to create this. So the idea is to really bring this center of gravity. Now, look, if we do that well, that's going to help UCI startups. So
Sure.
That's part of my strategy is that we're just building an ecosystem around it. It's not built for UCI, but obviously UCI startups get benefit if we have more VCs here and more angel groups, et cetera. But really, this building it for the community is an important passion of mine.
No, and I commend you for it, because I heard about you recently, even though I've been out raising money. And so I'm really excited to hear what you're doing and how you're trying to connect all the dots and bring things together. So practically, maybe give us a case study. I'm a startup, CEO of a startup, and maybe I've raised money through Co-Fund 2 or one of the angel groups. What practically or what programs you practically offer to help me through those stages of innovation and development? Because if I'm a newbie out of college and I'm 25 and I've never done this before, Lord knows we need some guidance and certainly roadmaps of how to go from A to B to C to D. So do you guys offer mentorships or programs for those young entrepreneurs that they can tap into to get that experience?
Absolutely. I just come back to the SBDC. Free consulting for those startup any age, but certainly the younger ones who might need a little more help. And Luis Vasquez, who manages our VC relations, he's the guy to go to if you're young and you're looking for your seed fund, or someone, say, a little more or more experienced like you that needs Series A right now or Series B. So again, the SBDC is the place to start. The SBDC does report to Luis and completely connected. And so they'll hand off a deal, and a number of the consultants are Techos Angel members or Co-Fund members. So again, the idea is you build these pieces that cross-link so that when you get in the system, you get you get socialized into other programs and workshops and people to help you, right? So that's one of the benefits of building this at the Cove, is that it's a system of programs. And so there's a few programs that are for, of course, our faculty and students. But again, most things are designed for the community, so they're designed to connect.
That's beautiful. So obviously one of the concerns of anybody with an idea and they're coming to UCI and they engage you guys, the concern would be, if I'm creating IP and now I'm working with UCI, and this is so we can clear this up for the audience, who owns the IP? Because there's somewhere, institutions and, whether, University of Buffalo or any number of universities that when you start developing, they take an eye and they look at, well, what do we contribute and what do we own of that IP? So how do you guys think about the IP ownership, whether you're not related to the university, but you're coming with a pretty incredible idea? How do you guys manage that?
So first of all, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you have an idea and you want to rent space, you come to our building. We don't touch your IP. Doesn't matter what you develop, it's yours. If you decide to work with a researcher at UCI, then we would typically share the IP. So if you're an employee of the university or a graduate student, the regents own your IP. So if you work in a lab and you're funded and you develop something, the university owns that IP. And that IP can be licensed to you, to a startup. Often we have grad students who, once they graduate, they get their PhD, then they start a company and they license the IP they developed in the lab. So it depends if you're UCI connected or UC connected. That's it's the same thing for any campus that we do on your IP. If, let's say, you come in and you want to use some of UCI's IP, then you would license that. But the IP you generate on your own, we don't touch. But if there was IP developed in a lab, then you would license. And we can license that. We'll take equity for that license, and there's all kind of ways we can do that. So we usually want some cash. We found that if you come with no cash at all, that we want you to be able to raise some money, 10 grand or some money to get that going. But we will base the lease term, the license, of the IP on equity if you want, and you'll give us more equity if you didn't, right? Because we're taking the risk with you. But one advantage of that most people don't understand, well, there's licensing fees, there's royalty. Think about being an entrepreneur and Cisco or Google violating your IP.
Right.
How can you defend that? The UC system is massive. We're the 800-pound gorilla, and we will defend it. So there is some cost when you use our IP, but you also have someone very deep from a resource point of view to defend. And we have gone up against Apple, and we've gone up against some of the big tech players. And as an entrepreneur, as you know, unless you're really well funded, if you've just raised Series A, and maybe that's 5 million, you can't put millions into defending your IP. You need that money to build your company. And if you're even earlier, it's even harder, right? You can barely afford an attorney to start to defend it. So that is one advantage. But again, if you come in and you rent space, you use the wet labs, no ownership, it's yours. And even if you license IP from us, IP you develop on your own, separate from that, is your own.
Right.
So pretty clean, demarcation.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I was with a startup one time, and we were actually going in the D round in a strategic, came in under the guys in the C round of a corporate investor. So we lifted up the kimono, we showed them IP, and right before we were going to close on the D round of about 30 million at the time, all of a sudden this patent surfaces. And the 800-pound gorilla was Medtronic. And what it effectively did was kill the D round of funding. And so what you're saying is really important for entrepreneurs to think about. If you're in line with UCI and with their IP, I would never put it past any large strategic to gain an advantage any way they can. And I'm not saying everybody's in that camp, but they will do it. And the idea of having the backing of a UCI and their muscle is really something important to consider. So as I think about IP, and I have maybe some ideas in my head, how do people tap into the richest of ideas that all the brilliant thinkers come out of UCI has developed that's just sitting there as IP? Is there like a place where you can go to start looking at different ideas and concepts? Because there's probably a lot of companies sitting right there, and what you need is the experienced entrepreneur to bring it to life. So how do people get connected with the available IP at the university?
So again, if you go to our website, there's a tab that has most of our IP there and has write-ups on it. But again, you probably want to sit down with someone. So again, you can connect through the SBDC. Luis can help you connect to our licensing officers. And so what we would do is just get an idea, what kind of IP are you looking for? Is it, medical device? Is it sensors, or is it something to do with materials? And then we have different licensing officers that focus on those different areas. And so what we would do is we would bring you into a licensing officer, understand what you need. And if they weren't the right licensing officer, they, hand you off to the right one, but they would provide you write-ups. There are publicly disclosable write-ups, and if you want to go further, we would sign an NDA to go very deep, and you could meet with the researcher, etc. Again, go to our website, get connected. On our website, you'll find the managers who run the IP group, so you can actually connect with them directly. Again, the SBDC is another way to get in.
That's really helpful. So you guys have been on an epic growth pace. You have this new facility. I remember the old Cove, and now the new Cove is just a beautiful location. So maybe it's a crazy question because I know you're a nonprofit, you're tucked under the UC system, but what is the biggest need of UCI Beall Applied Innovation?
Well, I don't think we can have too many investors connected to the Cove. I don't think we can have too many entrepreneurs to the Cove. The more experienced entrepreneurs that want to come in and be mentors, be advisors would be helpful. We do have a board. There's a donation to be on the board that provides our strategic guidance, et cetera. So there's ways to get involved with us and sponsor events and sponsor our incubator, et cetera. So the university really stepped up to fund this. We don't generate enough revenue to pay for our expenses. So we go out to seek some philanthropy to help support the systems. We have lots of different programs for students, faculty, and for entrepreneurs in general. So again, the SBDC is a channel in, Luis is a channel in to see how you want to help. So there's all kind of ways to help. Lectures, workshops, we do roundtables, for the entrepreneurs. So if you're an experienced entrepreneur, just simply telling your story, your journey is a way to help. So sort of from a light touch to, getting heavily involved, there's all kind of ways to do that.
Right. So I want to switch gears a little bit because I think you really have a fascinating story as I sit here and listen to you and again, your career arc. And there's always somebody behind the person that we're talking to today. But in your mind, who's been the most influential person in your life and what did they teach you?
So there's been plenty. I'd say I would go to my father, who instilled an importance on integrity and work ethic. My father's work ethic, and he was not an entrepreneur, was extremely high, and he sort of pushed me on my work ethic. And if you can point to anything that's helped me be successful, I'm not that successful, but it's not my intelligence, average intelligence, it's my work ethic. And I would just say to most entrepreneurs, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and especially student entrepreneurs, and I'll take a hardworking average student way over the intelligent student who's entitled and doesn't have a work ethic. Work ethic wins almost all the time. I mean,
Right.
Obviously being more intelligent helps, but I would say it's more about the relentless pursuit of your idea and that work ethic to get there. The other thing that my father gave me, which I really appreciate now, which back in the 60s wasn't as important, but he worked in the meat industry and he promoted women to management positions and African Americans. He did that while we were in the South. And so many of your listeners are too young to understand, but doing that in the 60s in the South was way ahead of the curve. And so I was brought up to treat people equally as long as they make an honest living. That's what he said. The other thing is my wife has been incredibly supportive. We've been married over 30 years. She was there in the very beginning when I bootstrapped the company. And if it wasn't for her support, there's no way I would have built Natick up and be able to sell it and be in the position now to try to get back to the community. So my father certainly instilled some very important characteristics, I think, or attributes. And my wife is the one who really supported me, and I'd come home and whine and complain about the day, and she was there and she stuck with me.
Man, what a gift. And your dad, maybe he wasn't entrepreneurial in the sense of you founding a company or him founding a company, but clearly he's a risk taker. I mean, ahead of the curve in the South to do those things. I mean, to me, that was sort of risk taking, and
It was.
in his biggest form back in those times.
He was actually physically threatened in the South.
Sure, I could imagine.
With physical violence. I remember him having to get a gun. He never had a gun, but he got a gun for a few months because there was someone who was threatening him because of that, because of promoting an African American, which is just, I mean, in today's world, that seems crazy, but back in the 60s, it was probably mid 60s in the South, that was unfortunately not too unusual.
Yeah. Well, it really speaks to his character and the man he was, certainly. So what is the most important lesson you've learned in life, whether it be entrepreneurial in your personal life? What could you leave the audience as maybe it's one or two, but the most important lesson you've learned?
So I think there's a couple. I think that the whole concept, and I did a TEDx talk on this, of embracing failure. So I did a TEDx talk on courage to fail. And I think that especially young entrepreneurs can look at older entrepreneurs and think, oh, well, I don't think I'll get there. I literally made every mistake in small business. I used credit cards to make payroll. And so younger entrepreneurs, when they look at someone old, and basically if you're over 40, you're nearly dead in the classroom. So I'm ancient. If you're over 40, again, you need to get them to understand that most of those successful people had hundreds, if not thousands, of failures along. I had Stuart McClure in my class who sold Silence last year for like 1.6 billion. I had the founder of Blizzard in my class. They all talked about their failures. And so one thing is, I'd like young entrepreneurs to understand that you have to confront and almost run into failure. And it's not easy. And it's you just got to keep going back at it. It doesn't mean you don't go home dejected when you didn't get funded, or they pulled the funding or whatever. It's not that you're going to have disappointment, but you just got to get back up and go right back at it. And that relentless pursuit of your venture or your idea is usually the difference between successful and unsuccessful entrepreneurs, because eventually that relentless pursuit will either help the company grow or get in a position to sell. I mean, a lot of things can go wrong. You can still have that relentless pursuit, but you're more likely to be lucky or be successful with that pursuit. So I would say embrace failure, don't run away from it, and sort of this relentless idea or concept.
That's beautiful. So is there anything we have not covered that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I guess the only thing I'd say, because of these unprecedented times, is that I can guarantee you that the Cove and Beall Applied Innovation is going to surge back. We are talking a lot internally about what we're going to do when we can reopen, when we can physically reopen, because we're operating from our homes.
Right.
But when we can get our event space back open, we are going to surge back. We will overcome this. I'm very optimistic. I mean, I also realize there's a lot of people hurting and a lot of small businesses hurting. Mm-hmm. And I'm not minimizing that. But I definitely want to help lead our startups back and open up funding and access to funding and our consultants, et cetera. So I would just say that those who are in the middle of startups, just conserve cash, as you know, just survive. And I think in the summer, I'm hoping we'll be back in the building in June. We don't have any word yet from the governor and all that, all the official stuff, but hopefully we'll be back, and maybe we'll be back with masks or some kind of social distancing in place, but we'll come back and we will do everything we can to help the startup community. And I would also ask any listeners who are successful entrepreneurs, business people, to get engaged with the Cove and help us lead that surge. We need everyone's help. This is not something by any means we can do by ourselves. I mean, we're going to work as hard as we can, but we need to embrace everyone and engage everyone. And we need to be sure that startups and small businesses get the help they need and the support, so we can really lead a resurgence from an economic point of view here in Orange County.
Yeah, well said. And I echo those sentiments and those comments. I do believe it will come roaring back, in whatever form that looks like. I'm sure people will be thoughtful about how they reconnect in mass and in groups of people. And I'm sure there'll be some guidelines that are helpful. But I would tend to agree that I think people are just itching to get back into the game of life, and certainly driving their passions and their business and their ideas forward. So as we conclude with the last question, how can people learn more about you and again about Beall Applied Innovation? Where could they go? If you want to give the website, that'd be great.
So yeah, they can just probably Google Beall Applied Innovation to get to it. But the website is innovation.uci.edu. And that will get them to our SBDC and a number of programs that we have. And if they would connect with us, we'll reach back out. We'll reach back out now. We just won't be able to physically meet. But for instance, Luis can help you remotely or virtually if you need to connect to funding sources.
That's fantastic. Richard, thanks so much for coming on Beyond. Really enjoyed the conversation and sharing the vision and the great important work you're doing there at Beall Applied.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this interview and doing these interviews in general. This is helping the ecosystem. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks, Richard. Enjoyed it.